What does it mean to be empathetic? Why does it matter? Our country needs empathy. We are divided, and each side needs its will to subside in order to find the ties that bind us. My job as an actor is to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, to make you believe that this pretend person is worth caring about through my own real feelings. My empathy is based in my craft and in my ability to let go of my idea of me. So I did a play by the name of Ruined. I played a young Congolese soldier who was raised at a young age to rape and pillage any village he was pressed upon, to kill without thought. Now, how was that accomplished? You see, my mother says you can't run faster than your shoes. It's a phrase that I use to persuade people to find patience. So naturally, when I said it to my friend, African-speaking Proverbs, she asked me, what does that exactly mean? It means that you can't move past your circumstance. You are where you are. And like the shoes you are in, the circumstance you are in, you cannot run past that. So how does that apply to empathy, to identity? To truly understand someone, you have to try and walk a mile in their shoes, but you can't wear their shoes if you don't first take off your own. My shoes are my circumstance, how I view right and wrong, my identity, if you will. I've had many drafts of this talk, and there's one example that I use to exemplify the way that I empathize. So, if you put two young men in a room, both suffering a great loss. One young man lost his father, the other one lost his dog. Can you tell the difference? Is grief not grief? But how does that compare? Why am I comparing the two? How does that relate to identity? I think it's easy to give a man $1 if you have $10, but can you give a man $1 if you have $2? Can you find a man $1 if you have 50 cents? It's easy to be empathetic when the subject raises no objection to your sense of self. But when you're at an impasse and you need to find a path that's different from your own to understand someone else, it is so much harder to do than lend your heart then. My name is Okieriete Onaodowan. It is unique. I grew up in East Orange, New Jersey, with this weird African name. We're a proud family in a poor neighborhood. I always wanted to be a part of something that I wasn't, and in my young mind, I felt the only way to be accepted was to assimilate. So, one day, a friend that I made, he gave me a food stamp to buy candy. It was a gift. So, I go to my mother, and she immediately snatches it out of my hand, and she reprimanded me. I believe she couldn't see past our pride to oblige me. For her, she worked countless hours, long days, and even longer nights, and it was an insult for anyone to think that we needed help. But I couldn't find fault or shame or blame in this gift and this offering. But to my mother, this was not a boy sharing, it was someone declaring that our family was in a financial state of emergency. But I couldn't see that. The common denominator was easier to see as a child because my sense of self wasn't quite rigid yet. And as adults, we must be able to remove what roots us, what we identify as I, in order to find empathy towards something that is other. So, when I got to college, I was the acting guy with a weird African name, so circumstances are different, the name's the same. But in my craft, there were two phrases that I learned to help me evade being a bad actor. First phrase is, take the attention off of yourself and you put it on someone else. And the second phrase is, make the world an analogy to you. Focusing on these phrases in time helped me find compassion for all the characters that I met off stage and all the characters that I became on. So here's an example. Let's take that example from a while back between the two men, or actually, before I used that example of two men, I used to use an example of two women. a woman who lost a baby and a woman who lost a cat. But I found that example was too hard for certain hearts to hear. There were two hearts specifically who shut down when I started talking about the loss of a child. And they said to me, one of the hearts had lost a baby while the other had just born a child. And one said, it's even harder to hear your point of view because you have no children of your own. You have no jurisdiction to speak with conviction about a subject that you have not been a victim of. And they were right. They were absolutely right. But in spite of that, I heard this voice in the back of my head saying, blah, blah, I don't understand. But I don't get it. I don't understand. How can they tell you how you should be? Pause. So I put a pause in that weird little voice, and I cued the very first phrase, which is take the attention off of yourself and put it on somebody else. The talk of a loss of a child is not a mild subject to send somebody's way, and it got in the way of my point penetrating. So then I cued phrase 2. Make it an analogy to you. What could someone say to me that would cause me to shut down in the exact same way? So I imagine it's as if someone said to me, immigrants are lazy. You grew up poor because your mother didn't do more, and it's her lack of trying that failed your family. Now, if there's anything that you want to say to shut me down and not hear the point you're trying to convey, that is the phrase. But again, that weird Nixon voice just popped right back up. But that's your voice. Are you going to change the phrase? What are you going to do? Just say it however you mean. Pause. Cue phrase 1 again. How can I understand how you feel if I'm focusing on how I feel about you? It doesn't make sense. So, I changed my phrase. In my pursuit of empathy, I go back and forth between phrase 1 and phrase 2. Now, I realize within myself that when your back is against the wall and the stakes are highest, rarely do you rise to the occasion. You normally fall back on habit. So every day I work on training my habits to be better. Now here's a crucial step in the pursuit of empathy. You have to believe and have faith in people. You have to believe that people are trying their best to understand each other. You have to believe that we all, in fact, are capable of feeling, wanting, loving, and fearing in the exact same way, that we are not our shoes, that we simply wear them. There's a staggering statistic that 2/3 of Americans do not have a passport, because it takes a lot of energy to approach empathy by constantly questioning your own identity. It's hard to continually try to draw a line between you and someone else. It's taxing, it's stressful. So there's a friend of mine, his name is Zach Houghton, and he developed this great program called Passion Passports. So what Passion Passports does is if you have a passport, you can nominate a friend who doesn't, and they'll do what they can to help them acquire that passport, and then also sponsor a trip for the two of you to leave the country. It's good. But this is why. Because most people's imaginations are not as active or creative as mine. And my craft and career hinges on the development of my mind in that way, so why imagine what another person's life is like when you can experience it firsthand in a foreign land? So I traveled for the first time to Europe about 2 years ago, and I stayed at a hostel in Paris. And I met a young Russian boy. And we got along because our favorite band was Blink-182. There are 3 songs of theirs that I truly, truly love, and 2 of the songs were his favorite songs. So, yeah, he referred to me as a black, and he was surprised that I listened to something other than rap music, and I smiled more often than not. But his emotional state of wanting to leave home for the very first time and learn as much as he can is something that I can understand. So upon our parting, before we went our separate ways, he placed in my palm a trinket, a gift. But in my hand, all I could see was that food stamp. As a child, I saw past circumstance, and I latched on to the one thing that binds us all, the one thing that I can find in any soul that I encounter. Now, as I got older, I let circumstance and my stance on certain subjects cloud the fact that the one true connective tissue is that we all draw from the same emotional well. My career keeps me on that path. So, how did I go about playing this crazy Congolese soldier? I took off my shoes. I let my idea of what is right and wrong, how I see the world, go. I strapped on his boots and I took a step. I took the attention off of myself and I put it on the fact that this soldier was raised from a young age to kill, that he was desperately trying to find a place to land, a place to belong. And then I made it an analogy to me. Constantly being on the outside, trying to find a way to the inside. Someone handed him a gun, someone handed me a food stamp. My mother reprimanded me, nobody reprimanded him, and that was my way in. These parallels keep me moving towards finding a we in the space between us. I can now approach or attempt to approach someone with compassion and empathy. I don't agree with all of his actions. I don't even have to let go of my center. You don't have to throw away your shoes when you're walking in someone else's. You don't even have to leave them behind. All you have to do is take them off, keep them in hand, and walk forward. Thank you.